they make men?
Good couple. The 7th. It's 9:08. All council members are present. Town attorney, town manager, town clerk, and a couple of folks from the public. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A quick item before we get going on the agenda here. I just want to get this out over the airwaves here. I want to thank Beach Baptist Church, the Florida Department of Health, Boris Kritzer, Sean Kritzer, Johnette, all the volunteers down at Beach Baptist Church yesterday who facilitated the vaccination program. I think 250, 300 people, something like that, were vaccinated, and it was smooth as silk, and it was a beautiful thing to see. That it was down here on the beach. As a result of that, I had been speaking with the Florida Department of Health, and we've scheduled another vaccination date down at the Church of the Ascension. Same vaccine. It's the Pfizer vaccine. That first dose will be given on next Thursday, April 15th, next day, in the afternoon. They have another location in the morning, so we'll be in the afternoon from 1 till 5, Church of the Ascension. There's lots of opportunities here. There'll be more than 300 shots available. It could possibly go up to 500. I don't know, but so anybody that's interested, more details will be coming out as far as where to contact, where to call to put your name on the list for that. Or if people do show up that day, they won't be turned away. But we would prefer that people call in so we have a list going so we can tell the Department of Health how many shots we think we're going to need. Also, the kids at this point now, our younger people can get vaccinated 16 and up. If any 16 and 17-year-olds want to come down, or 18 for that matter, but 16 and 17, they have to be accompanied by a parent. So if any of the kids want to come down, we would love to have lots of kids come down. There's also a form that has to be filled out, word I'm looking for, the release, waiver that has to be signed, and it takes about 3 or 4 minutes to do. If you can do that ahead of time before you come down, download it from the Department of Health's website. That would be helpful. Otherwise, they'll be provided there at the church hall that afternoon. Okay, there'll be more information coming about that, but I just want to get that out there. Now we'll go to the agenda.
Could I make a request,
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
I noticed that we have Kathy Light here from the Anchorage Advisory. I didn't want her to have to wait through the entire agenda for that discussion.
That's a great idea.
So
Yep, we
I
can.
thought maybe, since that was an add-on, we could do it first if nobody objected.
No, there's no objection to that, is there? Okay, let's do that. Catherine Light from the Anchorage Advisory Committee. That one.
AAC.
AAC. Catherine, want to come up?
Kathy, do you want to say anything?
Yeah.
Is that on?
I wasn't planning on saying anything. Chelsea had just let me know that you had tabled a discussion till today, and I'm just here if anybody has any questions. I didn't really have anything.
Well, just to remind everybody, the AAC actually passed a motion asking the council to reconsider
Consider Bayside
Bayfront
Park.
Park as a
Bayfront Park,
possible
yeah.
location because the condo deal had apparently fallen through.
And I
Remind
got-
everybody.
Yes, remind. And I also got an email, which I think was sent to all of you from Doug Spear and Smith, about Matanzas. I think it was sent to everybody. So,
I got emails from several different people. It was more than just Doug. We got emails from several people regarding their positions.
Yeah.
Which I don't think anybody's position had changed. They were all the same as they were, so.
Well, why don't we kick this around a little, Catherine, and then if you want to add anything to it, we'll bring you back up.
okay, I
All right.
appreciate that.
Well, let's talk about it then. Who wants to start the conversation?
Yes, I will.
Go ahead.
My position really hasn't changed. I don't think that's the spot for that. Continue to look for other options. Doug, as we just mentioned, is willing to work with us. May not be exactly what everybody's looking for, but he seems open to work with the town, make it a viable solution for now to continue to work with him. Roger, have you had a chance, did you reach out at all to Moss Marine to find out if they have any interest in potentially getting involved in this?
I did, I have an appointment with one of the principals for Friday. He was, location was approached because we went to all the potential businesses a while back to just let them know, gauge their interest, let them know that we were potentially looking for somebody. But the soonest he was available to get together with me was on Friday, and we have an appointment for the Friday for me to kind of tell him what we're looking for and see if there's any interest, opportunity, ability to collaborate or not.
I guess my only comment on that is that the town and the AAC has been looking toward moving this in-house. And I think the people that you're approaching who own marinas, at best might rent a space to use. So it's still, we would still be in a tenuous situation. That's our problem with Matanzas. They're willing to work with us for now, but it may be that amount of space becomes so valuable that they can't give service to us in the future. In addition, we're looking at expanding the mooring field, and that is at the request of people who live along the bay to try to keep from having all the derelicts out there. If we expand the mooring field, we need to have more space than is available at Matanzas for showers and laundry, etc. So we really need to find a place that's ours, and I think, Moss Marine would have the same disadvantages that Matanzas might, that at best they would be willing to rent to us, and we would always be in a tenuous situation.
And I understand that. I don't feel putting showers and restrooms that in the park, one of the only valuable spaces that we have that has a view to the back bay on that end of the island, just doesn't make sense. And honestly, I don't understand the urgency or the need to necessarily bring it in-house. I know that there's been discussion about how things get managed over there, but I think if my numbers are incorrect, Roger, please correct me. It just seems that's an awful big thing to do for potentially $150,000 worth of revenue a year on average.
It's not about revenue.
Well, but to give up a valuable park space for that, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. I agree, it's not just about the revenue, but, if you improve the offering to these boaters, and you improve the clientele caliber of these boaters, one could deduce that they would, when they came into our glorious shores here, that they would spread a little bit more of their largesse around throughout the town. And I'm a firm believer that would in fact happen. So if that's the type of clientele, or a portion of the type of clientele we're trying to attract, and why wouldn't we? And you really have to offer them something that's nice. And I really thought we had this put to bed with the Harbor House option, but as predicted, that came unglued, and that would not have been the right situation. I agree with the Vice Mayor that this is something that should be under the purvey of the town and under the control of the town. Otherwise, it was sort of like years ago when we were looking for a town hall. You know, we were here renting, but it was never really ours. We could have been put out. I mean, not so easily, but we could have been put out and had to go look for somewhere else. Finally, after so many years later, then it was suggested to buy the place. It was bought, and here we are today, and this will be here for however long. But, so we're put back into that position to take another look at this, and this is an option that has to be considered. It's property that the town owns. Would be the path of least resistance, although there was some criticism at the beginning about putting it there, but it certainly has to be considered. Right now, there aren't too many options. There's a lot of things on the come, but they don't seem to be as desirable as what we have before us. So those are my comments, and I'm sure we'll hear plenty of other comments from outside of these walls about this, but I think we really need to look at what we have before us.
Just a question to Roger and to my colleagues based upon the mayor's comments. I'm still trying to understand how the Harbor House fell apart based upon their denial of having those restrooms be public. I understand that that's what happened, and that's fine, but there are no public restrooms there now. I think the public, I don't sense any outrage. I could be wrong, but if we open up Harbor House to the Upland facilities, and the restrooms aren't available to the public, I don't know. I still don't understand why that's a deal breaker. There's no ordinance or there's no state law that requires that.
There's more to it than that, though.
Right?
Well, let me say this. What we did is, before we devoted, tremendous amount of resources to the, trying to put a deal together, we sent them, what we believe were basically simple terms that any commercial property owner would expect if they, not just the town, but any commercial property owner. That is that you have I don't know, a 7-Eleven, if someone walks in and says, "Can I use your bathroom?" and you're there, you're going to say no. If someone's dragging their child with them and says, "The kid's got to go to the bathroom, will you let me use your bathroom?" We're going to say no to that person. So we said we wanted a parking spot, like any commercial. If I was renting space from your building, I would expect you to give me a parking spot. And that, we basically wanted the similar amenities that any commercial enterprise would expect. In terms of restrooms, we didn't say, you can come at 12 o'clock at night and use the restroom, but when our staff was there, that if someone would come in and use the restroom and it's being paid for by public funds, it's us in a difficult position to say, no, you can't. They have commercial units in their building, but they basically want the building for all intents and purposes to be a residential type of use. For their vacation rental market. They don't want anything that puts their vacation rental market in jeopardy, is the sense that I got from them. But all that being said, you are the council, you are the policy setters, and if you want us to pursue that, and as part of that deal, put up a sign, that only the people from Morganfield can use the bathroom who have the pops, and we'll proceed on that basis.
And I think, Roger, you all were right to ask for that. In a perfect world, it would be great to have that, but we're not in a perfect world right now. We've got to make choices, tough choices. And having no public access to those bathrooms versus building a brand-new building obstructing the view in one of the few public parks that we have, it seems like when you contrast those two options, it seems like public access to the restroom seems like a pretty reasonable option compared to the other option, at least to me. And again, you're absolutely right to ask for it. I know the town's got parking nearby that they could utilize. It just seems like these aren't, in a vacuum, you're absolutely right, but we have to make choices between options. Those don't seem like terrible compromises to have to make in order to make the Harbor House work. I'm just thinking out loud. It doesn't seem like that should be a deal breaker to me, in my opinion.
If I could respond to you,
Yes, please.
I think the bathroom is reflected of the conflict that we have with the fact that this condo is not totally commercial. If they were all commercial condos, we wouldn't have this conflict. But the majority of the building is residential. There's going to be a constant pushback from the residents in the building against activities that are occurring in our space. There's a conflict there just in what those two entities want. And I don't dispute, if I were a resident living there, I would have difficulties with commercials, businesses that interfere with my private life. I think that's the issue, that the restrooms are symbolic of problem with a condo that exists in a building that's part residential and part commercial.
Point well taken, but the owners of the condos seem to want to make it work given the conditions that Roger mentioned. So we can either take them at their word, or I understand the inherent conflicts. You're right. I'm sure there's inherent conflicts there, but given the tough choices that we have to make, that seems like a risk that might be worth taking. I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, they say they want to work with us. On the other hand, if you look back in their condo records, they took away the parking spaces from the commercial entities that were already in the building against those businesses wanted.
For me, the parking was the plan for the parking if the building was to go up.
But what I'm saying here, that isn't the issue. The issue is the conflict between the residential and the commercial. The residents don't want activities that are commercial-like occurring in their building. That's why the commercial parking spaces were taken away previously. So we would be under the threat of something similar to that happening again. If we buy the condo there and the residents come and say, we don't like people bringing their laundry into the building, we want to make a rule that there's no more laundry in this building, they could do that to us, even though we purchased it for that purpose.
And also
So
think
the
about it,
bathrooms are emblematic of the problem.
and also think about that they were among the most vocal opponents of putting the building in the park. So they should be bending over backwards to try to give us whatever alternative they can. This should be their best offer. So I kind of agree. What happens down the road? Because I've seen a number of HOAs, and right now the way that I understand their setup is that the residents have dominant vote. And they can pretty much push whatever they want. So this is supposed to be a mix of commercial and residential, but they've stripped so much off the commercial, that's why the building's vacant in the bottom now. Because the conditions they put on it are not conducive to any normal business.
You all get the same emails that I get. I mean, it's constant from those people down there. I mean, I don't mean it in a derogatory way, those people, but, you know, the president of the association and the other ones, they're constantly complaining about what's going on down there, with what's going on across the street at Nervous Nellies or over Matanzas, in the street, the town, the this, the that. It's constant that we're getting these emails from them. Now, that's not to say that if we built something across the street, we still wouldn't get those complaints, but it's indicative of what we would be dealing with. And I mean, if our eyes are wide open, we see this ahead of time, that should be the kicker, the indicator, that if the relationship is not good going in, it's certainly not going to get better once we're in there.
Now I'm going to interject here too, because as we had a number of options for this, and we still do, but as your first choice options either eliminated or downgraded, then the options that you were not considering because there were better options become more feasible. There's two different things I think we should look at. And I think I mentioned this, Kathy Light mentioned that they have some realtors on the Anchorage Committee and they've looked around to see what's for sale. I think though that it may be worth taking that to another level and actually finding suitable buildings and going and seeing if the owners are willing to sell them. Proactive, because I know.
And I guess my response to that would be, I'm fine if the majority of council says, no, we don't want a building in a park, because a park is so important. I love parks. I just want the rest of council to understand, then you're going to have to put out a large amount of money down the road to buy a suitable place, put this to build it.
Let me,
And
can I finish my point, Rex?
My
Sorry, because I really
apologies.
hasn't really gotten, I'm just now getting to me
I
after
thought you
going
were
through the
done.
council. I'm not. Okay, to actually go through, and I looked, there are some properties on like Second Street or Second Avenue, whatever it is down there, that seem like they're not particularly commercial properties. It wouldn't be maybe as expensive because they're under the bridge and they're used for more institutional uses. Another idea that we've kind of discounted is using Bay Oaks, where we have land at Bay Oaks. It's not ideal because it's people saying it's not downtown, although the dinghies, there'll still be a dinghy dock downtown. So the downtown would still be available for people. Getting to it is a little tricky. I don't know if we can actually look and see if we make sure that it's easy to get to. The advantage of putting something at Bay Oaks is that it gets more use out of Bay Oaks. And that's one of the reasons we're doing the major change is that. So I'm just bringing this up because now these options were not considered to be palatable. But if you take away the ones that were, then the ones that weren't now become a little more palatable. And I'm looking about as far as real estate, Rexanne, is looking now to acquire something, to not say we're going to do something and then wait until that becomes completely untenable before we go and look.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I just am saying that if the council wants to reject what the AAC is asking, then I would like to hear from them that they have the stomach to spend some money, because that's what we're going to have to do. If you want to preserve your park, that's wonderful. But then in order to find a place to put this, we're going to have to spend some bucks. So I would like to hear that, yes, our park is so important to us that we're willing to put out the money, buy something somewhere else.
A lot of it depends on how much money. And if Bay Oaks is an option, then that's already land that we have.
The problem with Bay Oaks is we've been told that there's lots of problems with various agencies about cutting down the mangroves, building a dock there, et cetera, that we have a lot. We might not be able to do it, we're told.
I'd like to hear from John. I think you were going to say something back when
Well, I was,
talking about the legality or non-legality of having public bathrooms there.
no, it wasn't the issue of the legality. It was really that the correspondence between the town and the ownership interest at Harbor House was beyond just the bathroom issue. It was not limited to just the bathroom issue. They would not give us a parking spot. Any, period. They did not want issues with noise. Very general. They did not want a place where people would come and hang out, as they characterize it. They did not want a public bathroom or public laundry area. So I don't want to necessarily characterize that the bathrooms or the laundry area are public in the sense that anyone and everyone could come to, but there would be people from outside coming and using those facilities, both the laundry room, the bathrooms for showers, as well as the bathrooms for their personal hygiene. So if you want to characterize that as public, then that was an issue with Harbor House.
We have to do that by law, John?
Well, that's the whole purpose of providing it for the patrons of the
But they pay a fee to use those services, right? I mean, it's a fee for service dynamic. Why would we have to let someone walk off
Well,
the
I
street
mean,
use the laundry
it's,
facilities? Just
I
asking.
do think that there is an issue that you're using public funds to improve property and to exclude the general public from having access to that site, you're potentially running into issues with.
But John, didn't we do that for a time at Bay Oaks when we charged a membership fee to use the facilities? Would we be denying access to the general public unless they paid their fee?
I don't
They always
know.
let you go in and use the bathrooms. I did.
I don't know, that was prior to my time, I must admit, Councilmember Ratterholt, but,
I just don't think it's unusual for the government to operate a facility where they charge a fee for service dynamic, and particularly when there's nothing there to begin with. I mean, people are used to using the restrooms or the laundry there, but to have a laundry facility for a select entity that we're trying to encourage to participate in our economy, and then to have laundry facilities available that we're now saying that could be open to anyone in the public, when they're paying a fee for that particular, specifically that service, seems odd to me. I'm just thinking out loud.
I'm just reiterating how Harbor House characterized it.
Gotcha, I
okay?
gotcha.
And as I read the email, it was just the fact that people would be coming and going, whether they were from the harbor or not, that caused them concern, that it would be, and I, quoting them, it would be a place where people would be hanging out. It's foreseeable that's a list. It was not just the bathrooms. They said no to the parking. They said we're concerned about access to the bathrooms and to the laundry room. We're concerned about people hanging out. We're concerned about noise. So those are issues where they then said, and as a result, we're not interested.
Couldn't we, I mean, that seems like that's very easily, we can mitigate that. I mean, if you design the building that the desk area is open to the public, but it's a coded door that unless you're a paying customer in the mooring field, you don't have a code to access the showers or the laundry or I would believe that they would be okay with that. I mean, they have people just coming and going in the shops that they have there now.
I think though,
I'm only telling you, paraphrasing what they wrote.
I think, you look kind of, the bathroom thing to me, I think is a minor issue here, because there's another bathroom, publicly accessible bathroom right by the park anyway. But the thing is what happens down the road. So if you put all this money and you invested in this, in redoing this, and then the HOA decides, like they did with the commercial parking, they decide that, we don't want laundry. We don't want something that is fundamental to the service you provide as an upland provider, then what do? And the only way I think really to make it work is if they were to cede control, saying this is what we're going to do, and you have to agree some way that can't be changed by a subsequent board, which they're not willing to do or can't do.
Well, that would require them divorcing themselves from the association. I've seen, but that's very involved.
Frankly, I think that was a concern that as administration, certainly your town attorney, I would have a concern that public funds would be spent to improve property that was acquired for a public purpose, and then have that overridden by the condo association, which they reserve the right to do so. They very specifically said, the use and operation of whatever you do there is going to be subject to oversight by the condominium board.
Let me say, if there's not a majority of support for the Harbor House option, that's fine. If that is indeed the case, I would support Councilor Veach's concept of looking elsewhere then, because I don't think if it's between Bayside and Harbor House, that's why I'm exploring all avenues of Harbor House. But if that's not the will of the council, which is fine, then I would lean towards a solution like Councilor Veach or Councilor Allers have suggested with this other marina. This concept of having ownership of it, I understand that, but contractually you can build in some pretty good guarantees if the right partner could be found. So I don't think we should completely write off the concept of an outside entity supplying those services if it's a good marriage. If that can't be found, then looking for a location, as Councilor Veach discussed, I'm comfortable with that as well.
I think contractually you could do that with a a private business. It's out of the question with a condo association.
I understand.
You just can't be bound by them.
That's a fair point.
And so it's, even if we had a friendly association that we were entering into this with, it's a crapshoot at best, what's going to happen down the road. A lot of experience with these condo associations, and so have you, and you know how it can be. Anyhow, I'm all for exploring other options. I mean, we've got one that's solid, that is the fallback. I mean, I don't think anybody really wants to, well, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I don't think anybody, it would be their first choice to develop a park right on the bayfront, but that is the ace in the hole, and if nothing else becomes available. It may be by way of getting the word out to the real estate community that might find a willing seller somewhere along the way, and then decide whether we want to spend this money. We would have been spending it anyhow with Harbor House. There was a couple, 400,000 for the units themselves and whatever else the improvements were. So I mean, we've already decided that we were going to spend some money, or at least in theory, contemplated it. So I'm all for hearing about Moss Marine. I'm all for hearing about the places surrounding underneath the bridge, and if anyone else is willing. Well, I was just sitting here thinking of crazy things like we own that land underneath the bridge, right? I mean, without getting rid of parking, if anything could be built above it, and have walkways up into it and that sort of thing. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here. I mean, that could be.
Yeah, one of the fallback positions that staff has been looking at is putting like an office-type trailer underneath the bridge. We would lose some parking spaces in doing that, but we could possibly do that and put the amenities in that sort of office-type trailer. So we're trying to put together sort of a cost for doing that. We really believe that, and just to answer Councilor, I guess, Aller's point, the problem is not really bringing it inside versus outside. The problem is, if it's only one entity who could do it outside, that's the problem. If we had 3 people who were bidding on this and we have some competitiveness, therefore we would have performance leverage, we would have cost leverage, we would have something that there were multiple entities interested in doing it, then there probably wouldn't be a need to bring it in-house. But when it's one person and we're pretty much at, under the gun in terms of what they're willing to do or not willing to do, and we really, what do we do if they're not performing? Where do we go? What do we do? So that's really the issue that we have to try to figure out a way to address. And I'm all for looking for properties. This issue has been discussed by you all, by the AEC for a couple of years probably. I think that if someone had a property that, would meet our needs, our money's pretty, or as good as anybody else's, and they would be approaching us about that, but there's no harm in looking. But then again, when you're in a neighborhood, you have other potential neighborhood-related issues, if it's a residential neighborhood, for example. So, all that being said, Bay Oaks, I think you're familiar with all the challenges of trying to do something there. Look into that and try to do it, but we'll pose any more challenges than, by comparison, Bayside. Dealing with mangroves, et cetera. At the end of the day, my sense is you're going to be looking at a decision where none of the options are great, and you're just going to have to make the best of the worst, I guess.
I think it is pretty telling, though, that the Harbor House is one of the most vocal opponents of the building at Bayfront Park. But the restrictions and the control they want to put over this commercial real estate is making lean more towards that option that they don't like. So
Ironic, isn't it?
it is, yeah. It's kind of putting us between a rock and a hard place.
I'm gonna let them.
Could we, just to save time in the future, if we're able to locate a property, I think it would be helpful to know whether Bay Oaks is even an option. The town explore to see if there's even a possibility there, because if there's no possibility there, then I think that helps us make decisions.
Well, the answer, I'm gonna give you sort of the engineer's answer from my years of hanging around engineers. Anything can be done, it's just a matter of cost. Okay, so, so bringing that down to earth in terms of Bay Oaks, we could, find a path through the mangroves to make this work, but we're gonna have to pay to mitigate all those mangroves. We're finding a path through to do that. Then we still have to build a facility, et cetera. So is there a way? There's always a way. And we'll put together some potential numbers for that, along with whatever other options we could develop. But like I said earlier, you're going to find a drawback with each and every one of them. It's just going to be what's the best of the worst.
Someone just sent me a text, and I've discussed this before myself, is that there's always that possibility, and it's been kind of poo-pooed, but with the fire department, what they're going to do with that lot next door. I had envisioned, this conversation first started a year ago, or however long we've been talking about it, of them carving out a piece of that building on the southern end of it, and having that available to us, or us either lease it or buy it, or whatever the arrangement would be, and have the boaters come up that canal, and it would be right there. So I don't know. That's something that could be discussed with the fire district. I don't know how everybody's appetite is with that, but it's certainly an option that could be explored. It wouldn't be tomorrow. I don't know what their plans are with that property, but it's certainly that could be thrown out there. I mean, anything,
Just
like,
so
as you
everyone
say,
knows,
anything can
that's-
be done.
Just so everyone remembers, that's the canal where the gentleman claims to own the canal bottom and is in dispute with every single person who has a dock up and down that canal, which is the canal bottom.
Well, which appears messy on the surface, but, once you get underneath there and figure out what's going on, maybe it's not.
Just a matter of money.
Yeah, well, that's right. Anything can be done. Anything can be done.
Some have described that as,
Money cures many evils.
well, some have described that claim as a spurious claim, but I think the mayor raises an interesting point. I think that's certainly that's another option worth exploring, then less impact on the mangroves, and there is a significant property right next to Town Hall that's available, or may be available.
It's a little closer, well, it's not much closer. I mean, I'm sure it would be objectionable to the boaters. It's not right there in the heart of it, which is not the ideal location, but it ain't bad. And so anyhow, it's just something else to consider.
Yeah, I mean, that's a true statement. It just has an indefinite timeline.
Exactly, but maybe this might encourage people to start looking at things and start, thinking ahead here, if that's not being done already. Anyhow, anybody else want to add anything to this?
Oh, I'm looking, you said that meeting is this Friday, Roger?
Yes.
Looking forward to hearing what becomes of that.
Yeah, if there's anything substantial, I'll send out an email. If it's, I suspect the most, he's coming in to get educated, and he's going to take the whole thing under advisement. But if anything meaningful develops, I'll share it with you.
It would be a terrific location. I mean, terrific. If something could be done there, I'd be all for that. I'm sure the boating community would love something at Moss Marine. I mean, that's again, it's another possibility. So now we're talking about it again, and we can have this in our minds and keep thinking about it.
We need to give Roger and staff a clear direction. As far as Bayside Park, I know that we're moving forward with that. I don't want a decision, or not a lack of a decision, to hold up the progress of that, as far as putting any facilities there.
Well, it's up to you all. If, we're not going to make a decision today, but if you want to keep that as a possibility, not our number one, obviously, but it has to remain, in my opinion, it has to remain as a possibility.
I guess my question is, if
I'm
that's,
confused. I think at some point, we've got to say, Bayside Park, we're going forward with the plan that we have. We're applying for a grant with a timeline on it under certain plans. That grant is out the window if we are changing our plans to do something. Although I don't agree, I thought I heard 3 people here today say, no, we're not, maybe 4 people say, no, we're not going to put it in Bayside Park. That's what I thought I heard.
I don't know if I heard that or not. I don't know if I did.
Okay?
Oh, we
well,
can poll it right now if you want.
I'm,
You know, until we get more concrete information on potential options, I don't think we should take anything off the table. I understand there's a time, you know, it's supposed to be, Bayfront Park was supposed to be the easy now project of the 3 to get going.
I
My
think-
memory is that Roger sent us an email saying he wants us to opine about whether we're going to go forward with the information that he sent us. We can't just keep jerking the rug out from under him.
The situation changes.
but
At some point, you've got to
you gotta-
say, this is what we're
gotta
going to
move
do,
forward at
and
some
not,
point. You
and
can't-
he has to have some kind of,
Mr. Mayor, if I can help here perhaps. So if this is a, let's step back and make a irrevocable decision in, 30 or 60 days or whatever. But I mean, I don't know that I think we have to make a decision that either Bayside Park is going to move forward without a building, or is it going to move forward with a building in, the next month, maybe 2. And, as soon as you're comfortable making that call, we really need to get going on it if we can. So, I wouldn't encourage you to keep it hanging out there indefinitely. I would just say, look, we're going to get to this date and we're going to make a call one way or the other. It's either with or without the building, and, move forward. So,
What if we, put-
I don't necessarily have to make that decision today, but definitely soon.
I'm all for putting a deadline on it, saying that if we have 1 month to make a decision, but I'd like to know more analysis about possibly putting in Bay Oaks, a decision, a result of the conversation with Moss Marine, an analysis if we get found a, willing buyer anywhere and what the terms of that would be, so we have the information in front of us and we can make a decision.
I think we have a willing buyer. Well, hopefully we can find a willing seller, but yeah.
Sorry.
It's a lot of information to gather in 30 days, but I suppose the staff could put some feelers out and see
And I
what's.
think.
Yeah, now,
add the-
let
add-
me,
can I
let me
just-
ask this
Can
question.
I just add to his list the mayor's suggestion of the fire department land as well? Just have a conversation with the fire department, see if they have an interest in working with us on that.
Well, so let me just kind of script on that. The fire department, when they come in, they're gonna have to modify the zoning there, and we're gonna have a zoning hearing, and we're gonna be reviewing their project and whatever. And I suspect they're gonna need some cooperation from us as well to get their project moving. So I think there's room for us to work out things between reasonable parties. I just don't know that we're gonna be able to do anything now in a concrete fashion that would,
Yeah, I didn't mean do something. I meant see if it's even feasible. If it's not even
well,
feasible.
I know that they're looking for ways to, they don't really need to use their entire parcel, and they're looking ways to maximize the remainder of it. I know that today. So I think that there's an opportunity there, whether we can reach an agreement and how that would work. Between 2 governments is always a complicated thing, but well-intended people can work together and make things happen. I just don't think it's going to happen anytime soon to affect this decision. Now, what I would like to say is this. I would like to be able to proceed with getting Bayside on the counter and out there for bids and things And if we're to come back and make a final decision in 30 days, we can pull it back or put an addendum on if the council changes its mind, extend the bid opening or whatever, rather than sort of sit idle here for 30 days. I'd rather really work on the two issues concurrently, if that's okay with you all.
I don't see the issue or the need to postpone a decision 30 days. Whether you go with the Harbor House, whether you go with Bayside Park, whether you go with any of the other options we talked about, there's going to be some issues where it's not ideal. We have a service provider now. It may not be ideal, but neither is the Harbor House, neither is Bayside Park, there's no ideal situation. There's no magic wand that's going to give everybody what they want. I don't see delaying the progress on Bayside Park 30 days, how that's going to change that scenario where the idealness of having upland facilities changes. It seems like we're taking two steps, one step forward, two steps back, and at some point we've got to make the decision and we got to move on. And we do have a provider right now, although again it's not ideal, that is providing a service and is willing to continue to work with us and buy us time to be able to come up with a viable solution for everyone.
Well, I was just going to make that exact same point. I mean, if we got into some negotiations with the fire district and was able to work something out with them, we could still maintain the present provider until we got to that point. So and that could be done with Moss Marine, or it could be done with whoever, but, so we're not under the gun, so to speak,
No, we're only, the only item on a critical path is when and if you move forward with Bayside Park to the point of your decision is irrevocable in terms of coming back and saying, let's put the building on there. So I think we have a way to accommodate 30 days of further exploration of the options, yet not play Bayside by your consent to go ahead and put it out, start the process and put it out for bid. We'll make sure the bid opening date is after the 30 days so that we have time to bring you back whatever options and information we can develop in the next 30 days. And at that point, if you're saying we're absolutely dead set against Bayside as an option, go forward and, board that project without the building, we'll do that. So, well, wait a second, now that we have this additional information, we want to rethink that, we'll be able to accommodate both.
Roger, what does that change then? So let's just look at all the scenarios. Say in 30 days, we come back and the majority of the council decides that they want to move forward with that Bayside Park. Now, or putting the upland facilities there. Now you've got to go back to the drawing board with changing the infrastructure, redoing drawings, spending more money, and delaying the project even further.
Not really.
Well, so,
Infrastructure, I don't believe, has been done to have a building there. Plans for that, has that been worked
well,
in?
the concept plans, if I had to sort of, put a rough number on, where they were, if we decided to take it to a final building, I would guess Northwood of 50%. So that's what it would take if you ever decided to. You're right. When we're ready that day, it would take work to complete the other balance of the design. I would guess it's Northwood of 50%.
Just to put another question on the table, I'm trying to think like a contractor. I would be hesitant to go to all the expense to put in a bid on a project that I didn't know that the council was firmly behind. So I agree with Dan. We need to make a decision before we decide about putting it out for a bid, so that the contract, one of the problems we have here is we don't get enough people to bid on stuff. If we're putting nebulous things out there, out to the public that, this is what we think we're going to do, and why don't you bid on it, because maybe we're going to do this, I, as a contractor, would not be putting in a bid on that project.
I understand, but the kind of counter argument is that if we say we're not going to put a building, we say absolutely we're not going to put a building in the park. And pretty much we're also saying we're not going to do Harbor House, because without the threat of putting the building in the park, we have no leverage with Harbor House.
I thought the Harbor House thing was dead, personally.
And I don't necessarily agree with that statement. If things go well with Moss Marine, now you've got three potential, or at a minimum, three potential places: Harbor House, Moss Marine, and the current provider at Matanzas. So I don't see how making a decision to move forward with the park the way it is hurts or helps the situation at Harbor House. They've been pretty firm on what they're willing to do. I don't know that that's going to change one way or another, whether we decide to move forward and not put a building on Bayside Park.
Well, still, the thing with Harbor House is without any kind of more concrete contractual obligations to let us do what we want to do, a board down the road could decide they won't allow us to do what we do, and then everything has gone to waste. And that's what makes the Harbor House not feasible. It's not what they're saying now, it's what they might say down the road.
And I guess I see your point, and I'm more looking at it, from my perspective, is my opinion going to change one way or another, being comfortable with having an upland facility at the park? And it's not going to change. I don't see that is a good spot for it. I shouldn't say it that way. I don't think that's the best spot for it. I mean, I'm sure it's a good spot for it, but I don't think it's the best spot for it. I think keeping it a park is the best idea for that property. We've already made the decision, that's what we want to do. I don't think going backwards, we don't like what Harbor House had to say. Doesn't make
There's two
sense.
right there that don't want it to change from a park. Is there one more?
No, I'm just saying, I think we need to make a decision today.
Oh, we can,
So
we can.
as to, Bayside is going forward as a park without a building on it. We either need to decide one way or the other. I'm tired of,
Well, we can do that.
messing around with it.
That's what I was just trying to do.
Yeah.
You've got two over there that want to follow that path. I'm just looking for one more. If there's one more, then I think, Jim, you were leaning that way.
Mr. Mayor, I would support moving forward today Bayside as a park.
Good.
That helps. Yep.
There's three. And frankly, Bill, I mean, my preference would be to keep it as a park, but I wanted to keep it as a fallback. If everything else went to hell, we'd have something, you know? And, but apparently that's not the will of the rest of the council, and I'm fine with that.
I agree. That, I understand the will of the council, and it's not my preferential option anyway. But right now, we don't really have an option that we're happy with, and here we are taking other options off the table.
That's
And like I did, I really think that if you take Bayfront Park off, you're also taking Harbor House off the table.
Well,
Hey,
I
that's
think the
consensus.
council has spoken, and I think if that's the feeling, there's no, I understand your point exactly. I feel the same way, but there's a part of me that also wants to leave that as a park as well.
And is that a decision that we can make in a M&P and not in a council?
Well, I mean, it's not a decision per se, it's more of a direction, call it what you
Made the
want.
decision to
John's
move forward.
gone, but
Well, I think here it's clear that, people on the record are saying, proceed with the park plans that I've distributed to you all by email, and get them, go forward with the bid, and those plans do not include a building. Okay? So if there's any doubt in anyone's mind what they're voting for or direction they're giving, that's what's going to happen. The plans are going to go forward to bid without a building on the Bayside Park plans. And that's the direction I'm hearing from you today.
This leaves open the possibility of something happening in the future. But anyhow, let's just leave it like that for now. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah?
Yes.
All right. Well, for a non-agenda item, that certainly took a lot of time here. But, all right, we'll just move on. Next item is the Lee County update. We've just been provided a sheet, the progress that's going on the boulevard, and I think we've all read it. If there's anybody that wants to discuss anything on that, feel free. Otherwise, we'll move on.
it's interesting that this shows up on our agenda, but it doesn't really, information, is that anything different than they're sending out in emails anyway?
No, I actually believe this is basically put together by the public relations firm on behalf of the county from the virtual meetings that they're having, and that information is going into their email blast, as well as the most current version is coming to you here as a continuation of the longstanding practice of them updating the town council monthly.
I guess
If
my
you don't want to
question,
continue it, we could stop it.
My question would be, this is all well and good, but I keep seeing them, seems to be going backwards. For example, this morning when I came in, there was a tie-up at Publix because they were blocking off the road again in an already completed area for the umpteenth time in front of Publix. Why does this keep happening in the completed areas? I'm not asking you the question unless you
Well,
know.
I think one of the reasons why we want to have this report on the agenda, so when the council has questions like that, we can package those questions together and ask them to either address them in their next report or come to a meeting and address those to you.
I'd be interested
answers to
in
those.
knowing why they keep, and over the weekend, they had closed the right lane completely and had torn up the brand-new sidewalk and dug a big hole in an area that had just been completed. And I understand stuff happens, but this is happening over and over and over again.
And to your point, Vice Mayor, it might be helpful if this is on the agenda, if actually somebody from the PR firm actually shows up to our meeting so they could address questions and so forth. And I, as a follow-up to that too, I'm curious, have you heard any information from the state or the county with respect to the foot of the bridge discussion or next steps or anything on that?
Yes, we just, yesterday, I believe it was, received a date for the FDOT to come in, because we had set that up, and they delayed it, saying they weren't ready, and then they said another potential date with us, and before we even tell you what it was, they pulled that back. But they've now said another day, I want to say it's
May 17th.
second meeting in
will be
May, and FDOT is planning to come.
And forgive me, Town Manager, you say planning to come, they're going to come to our town council
Yes.
meeting and present?
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
The county and the town are in the passenger seats, and FDOT is behind the wheel.
I'm not being critical.
No, I'm just
yep,
saying,
yep.
in terms of the project rollout. So that's why, for the county to come, or for me to say that what we think we really need to hear from FDOT.
Very good, that's helpful, thank you.
Okay. We'll move
We'll
on.
ask someone to be here to address, to address those questions you have about sort of what appears to be rework, I guess, is what I would call it.
Thank you.
Next item is discuss the Bay Oaks site plan. This is to consider the Lee County School Board changes to Bay Oaks recreational campuses redevelopment site plan. Roger?
Yeah, so, 6 months ago, plus or minus, we had presented the same plan that you saw to board staff and the school board, and I think in sort of like their version of the management planning meeting, when said you would, and we were, we had worked out the reassignment of the land, and we thought we were sort of off to the races. And we were working on the shared use agreement, which is not really a land issue. It's, how we use their property when they're not using it, and how they use our facilities, and so on and so forth. And that precipitated a request from them to readjust boundary line. I'll tell you, I was none too pleased. Anyway, being what it was, and being, we had 3 to 4 meetings with them, we were able to work out an adjustment that we can make work in terms of the activities that we're going to offer at the park, and basically accommodate their request. So that's what we have for you, and unless there's any objection from your part, that'll sort of settle the boundary issue, and then we can work. We're continuing to work on the shared use agreement. We could possibly put that to bed, and then the deal will be done, and we'll be down to constructing the improvements.
Questions?
Did they give us any reason as to why they changed their minds?
Well, we had a jog in we had a double jog in the fence line. And they asked fence basically will be a straight shot in two properties, and we settle on a single jog, I guess is what I would call it, as a compromise.
Still doesn't really tell me why.
Chelsea, I mean, you spoke to their staff more directly than I did. Why don't you lay some of what their concerns were?
Morning, Chelsea Riley, Public Works Director. The concerns that their staff, the Lee County School Board staff, mentioned, both the principal and planning staff that we were working with, was the proximity of the ball field fence to their actual school building, and dealing with testing, and kids get really distracted really easily, so you hear the ding of the bat. So they asked for the jog of the fence line slightly further out, which we had. You'll see the field was shifted and then the building was slightly shifted. But the main concern from their point of view was the proximity to the school building and that first base line fence.
Some foul tips, huh? Just the noise?
That was part of it, but we did come up with a netting to catch those, so.
Chelsea, while you're up there, if you could, this is unrelated, but I heard the word jog, so I'll ask you, does the plan, the Bay Oaks plan, still envision sort of the half-mile walking path / jogging path around the circumference of the property? And does that go through the school property still as well? And is that part of a joint use agreement?
It's harder to see, that jog would go outside of this, it would not go into the school board's property. So, if you remember, the county gave us the 2 bow tie pieces and then the other piece. And of course, there's mangroves and some environmental concerns in there, but we anticipate trying to put a path through there as well.
It's still roughly a half-mile path around the circumference of the whole property? Is that
Yes,
still
sir.
what it looks like? All right, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, though, I don't know that you're going to be able sort of to jog from the fire station side of the property to the reserve part of the property. There'll be a path, but it won't be a straight shot through like that.
There's wetlands concerns back there, and so it might not be like at Mound House, their paths that they have, but a hard surface. It might, again, trying to work through some of those caveats with the permitting.
But it'll be a continuous path that goes in a circle? Is that roughly?
That's the goal,
Hate to
yes.
use the word circle, but
Goal,
yeah,
yes.
okay.
It includes Oak Street and it goes, doesn't go around the ball fields necessarily. In the path, go over, end up in the preserve. Go
But
down.
it won't end up in the preserve anymore in the path. Correct?
That's the goal, but right now we're seeing some hurdles with permitting.
Okay, cool.
There'll be a path, but
It may
it
be a
won't.
turnaround
You
and go
know, I
back.
think what you envisioned, Counselor, was it was basically going to run, for all intents and purposes, parallel with the bay, and you could start at one end of the property and literally go all the way to the other end. That's not going to be able to be accomplished.
Well, I appreciate that, but I do think it's in a perfect world, which we don't live in. If it's a half mile roughly and it's a circle, then people like to measure their distance. They like to go in a path in a circle. So in other words, going to one end and then going back the other versus having a complete circuitous route in a perfect world would be ideal, which we don't live in, but yeah.
Intent's there.
And so because of this little slice that's that slice that you have here that is now remaining with the school board, that causes the ball field to be moved and takes out room for a path?
Not necessarily. The wetlands is the,
Brutus, I caught that, Jim.
Hope I used it right.
Would be further complicated by some upland facility for a moored field. But anyhow, we won't get into all that right now. Okay, any other questions about this?
If they've worked it out, I'm good with it.
Very good.
Full disclosure, I've just received an email from the school board's attorney saying that they want us to vacate additional right-of-way, so this traffic that you have will change slightly, but we are working that out. So
They've
it's
changed their mind a second time?
third and fourth time, frankly, from my perspective, but I just received it literally as the council was discussing this.
Is it just a matter of feet, a few feet? Or
No, from what I gather, if you look at this graphic, all of the area that is white, above the pie piece, all the way to, we go back. As part of the swap with the county, the right-of-way along the top portion of this graphic was vacated and given to Lee County. So there wasn't an issue there. It's all primarily mangroves and wetlands, and it extended there, the preserve in line with what's actually there.
And that's the white part above this.
The
graph.
white part above, the T, white part above the piece of the pie, or as the triangle, I suspect is what they want now to be also vacated in favor of the school board.
So wouldn't that, let me hold it up here, John, because I'm a little, I understand what you're talking about. You're talking about this right here,
Yes. Yes, sir.
the white part of the road,
The small triangle.
currently in the outfield of the ballpark in this drawing.
Yeah, so, you know, I thought we had this worked out. You know, what we've already vacated was specifically what the school board had advised us they wanted, they needed. And part of the problem here is that the attorney who we started with negotiating this exchange is no longer the attorney, and a new attorney has come in on behalf of the school board, and he doesn't have the level of familiarity and background that all the other parties do. So we'll have to work this out.
How wide is that area, that white part? Chelsea?
Like a 40-foot wide right-of-way, problem?
If you can see, I'm sorry, if you can see this here, this L right of way was vacated and given to the county. County gave us these pieces. We vacated this yellow right of way, yet to record this document. Now, the county, per John Herron's just recent comment, they're requesting us vacate the rest of this. That does not, which working with our site plan as. Will not work. It will not work because that is our right field.
The county, you mean the county or the school board?
I'm sorry, the school board.
And we're not sure, what was the red part up there? It's too small for me to read. The little red triangle?
Little red, that is town right of way.
Could be that
And
that's
that
what
part
they're-
we could give them because it follows the right field
Oh, he's
fence.
hitting a homer to right field.
Maybe that's what
That part
they're.
we could give them, and, you know,
I think
If that's what they're talking about, then we can accommodate that.
we can't give them the white part, though.
But you know, based upon the flip side, you know, we'll work, point being is that we're finalizing this, but this is basically conceptually what we're trying to accomplish as
Fun.
staff.
This is lots of fun.
Chelsea, while you're up there having fun, could you just, and I will never hold you to this, but would you just with your pen draw a rough outline of where that walking path might be, given the site plan that you've got right there?
Just flip it over, flip it over.
I have that one. This one?
Yeah.
So if you see this dark marcation, that is all, that's the wetlands line, the buffer.
Okay.
So we have to stay outside of that wetlands, so it would have to go around this and stay within the wetlands. And then this is where it gets iffy back here.
Right, and then keep going though. Is it go all the way around then back to where you started?
Again, we're looking to see if that's a possibility. Army Corps, that's the discussions that we've had preliminary discussions with them.
Okay,
As of right now, not pretty, but we're gonna try our best.
okay, very good.
Has there been any discussions, or is there any interest in trying to connect the path up to the Matanzas path?
That was the ideal
That was
goal.
the idea.
Like that idea.
goal we had, but they have some fence security issues that they're concerned about, so. You know,
Many years ago, when I was on council, before Roger was here, we looked at connecting to Matanzas Preserve. The county was dead set against us connecting to them for any purpose, walking, biking.
I know that preserve has some caveats to it with regards to no bicycles back there. And so we'll work with them the best we can.
we understand, Counselor, the desire to have a activity path that's not, you know, 7/8 of a mile per se, but, I understand the concept, of runners and joggers want a round number, and we want it to be continuous, and we don't want you to be running back and forth doing laps type of thing in a small area, so we're gonna do our very best. Just can't,
I know there's no
so many
guarantees,
moving
but
parts at this point to commit absolutely to, but we do understand your request.
that's just a desire, yeah.
When you're dealing with wetlands, can you put up boardwalks in that, or does that still require mitigation?
The answer is that, they don't really want you in there, and they're gonna extract a heavy price for you to go in there if you try to go in there.
It's wetlands, period, not the preserve.
Period.
Just for a
I
little,
guess, getting back to the topic at hand, I guess what I would like to convey through Mr. Heron to the school board is, make us an offer and stick with it. And we put this on our agenda, we've looked at it, and now we're getting an email in the middle of a meeting with what John is trying to convey to us, but we've had no chance to sit down and talk to
I
him
would
and write it out.
I definitely wouldn't be comfortable doing this without bringing back something final that they signed off, so this will be the second or
I just
third
think
time that they've
We need to
done it.
convey to them as a council, jerking us around.
Yeah, I actually, I think in all honesty, it may be worthwhile for some of you to reach out to members of the school board and, let them know that this, because, their staff works for them, just like John and I work for you guys.
Right.
At some point, that enough is enough.
It's called negotiating in good faith. Make an offer, you don't then come back and ask for more when the other side is trying to make a decision about that offer.
I have every confidence Mr. Heron will be able to re-educate the new attorney at hand here.
That's about,
But just as an aside, a little history. Back when the town first set up the comprehensive plan, the hidden bike path was contemplated for the whole island. The whole island. And it was discussed and talked about, and these things that the planners throw out. And of course, the feasibility certainly quickly came to light on that. And but the concept was pretty cool. Get people off the boulevard and get them through on the backside of the island and down up and down the island. A tough one to accomplish, but in principle, it was a pretty clever idea. Anyhow, we'll move on. The next item is the news rack ordinance, which seems to rear its ugly head every now and then, and here we are again. Roger, or John?
yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, where do we go? All right, need to get the tab. Section of the code that I think has caused or been the subject of discussion is only a very small section of the overall ordinance, which is section 3-32. We do have a section in our code that does prohibit anyone from distributing newspapers or handbills or anything else that falls within the definition section for distribute, deposit, place, throw, scatter, or cast any commercial or non-commercial handbill in or upon any private premises which are temporarily or continuously uninhabited or vacant. And whereas the rest of the ordinance actually deals with the regulation of news racks and where they can be placed and so on. I believe that's the section that has been mentioned, that there are people who are complaining that one of our local newspapers is routinely and regularly distributing their newspaper to places that are vacant or uninhabited or on a temporary or permanent basis, and subject to this section, then that would be enforceable against them if that is in fact discovered or a complaint is lodged that we can verify.
John, now,
Sir.
In the definitions, newspapers are not considered handbills, all right? Because the definitions say, a handbill, and if a definition says other than newspapers.
It's commercial handbill. Not have an exclusion for newspapers. Include any printed or written matter.
I'm looking at the handbill distributor, I guess, because it says other than newspapers. It's below 4, commercial handbill. So anyway, there seems to be making a distinction between newspapers and handbills, at least in the distribution.
There's a definition of non-commercial handbill that includes newspapers. And it says in section 3-32, any commercial or non-commercial handbill that would cover newspapers.
I think if we cut to the chase here, gentleman that brought this forward, from the advisory committee for the harborage there. His point is that the island is being littered by these newspapers because they're put on people's yards and so forth that don't pick them up. Then a storm comes up and blows them, and they end up in the mangroves, or they end up all over the island, which is true. And not only that, there are people, neighbors, I'm not going to name who they are, but the past 2 weeks I've walked out of my yard, and I've left them there only because of I want to see how long they stay there. I have driven over them, walked past them, walked around them, and not bent down to pick up the newspapers. These are people that are living there full time, so there's no excuse for that kind of behavior. But his objection is that because it's a free paper, it's distributed everywhere to everyone. That these papers primarily on the rental properties. I hate to discriminate against the renters, but they're not being picked up, they're not being put away, and so forth and so on. So that's the complaint, and that's why I think that's why we're here today to discuss this. It's a matter of whether we want to tighten up this ordinance regarding these the disposition of our free daily weekly newspaper, The Observer. It's The Observer, and or whether we want to just leave it the way it is. Yes, sir.
I do want to let you know that I did communicate what I perceived was a concern with the editor of the Observer, and he has advised me that they talked to their distribution folks to make sure that if last week's newspaper isn't picked up, not to compound the problem by putting this week's newspaper in the same yard. So they're reviewing their internal practices to make sure that that doesn't occur, and but that doesn't resolve last week's paper that's not being picked up, but at least they're not compounding the problem.
We've all done it. We've all walked through the neighborhoods and picked up these papers, and I've been doing it for years. But, so the question is, do we just want to let it go the way it is? And I got the same email from the Observer, and I'm glad they reached out and said something. I'm sure they're a little concerned about what we're talking about here, but
Having had the, I'm sorry, are you done?
oh, well, I just want to know if there's any desire from the appetite from the council whether to pursue this on any other level.
Having had the chance to read what Paul has referred to, I've got to say I agree with him. I think there's an inference in our definitions that a newspaper is not a handbill. When
Well,
you read the definition,
I stand corrected because the non-commercial handbill includes newspaper.
it says other than newspapers.
That's and the distributor part.
Right, but
Then go
by,
to the definition of the actual handbill, the non-commercial handbill.
because that is in there, because it says other than newspapers, I think they could argue, if we tried to cite them, that they're not a handbill. Just think it's a loophole that should be tightened up. If you're going to go after anybody, tighten it up.
Well, again, I think that have a tendency to sometimes read the definitions and the sections of the code separately or not entirely. If you look at my understanding of local newspaper that we're talking about is that it doesn't necessarily have a circulation list distributed equally and to everyone because it's quote unquote free. Definition of handbill distributor and the exemption for newspapers is a newspaper that has a circulation list. On the circulation list, and I'm guessing it's probably the Fort Myers newspaper as paid for circulation. That is what's exempt. Any other type of distribution of commercial or non-commercial handbill by a handbill distributor is prohibited, subject to the limitations in 3-32, which is that any private premise which are temporarily or continuously uninhabited or vacant.
I'm just trying to think, as an attorney representing the Observer, what I would argue if you cited me. Okay.
And my argument would be you don't fall within that exemption.
Get that. I'm just saying, why give them an argument? So,
I think on the other side, right now, they are
Well, I
talking
think
cooperatively.
It was really an accommodation to the paid newspaper, the circulated newspaper, frankly,
About
that language.
shoppers, where does a shopper fall in those definitions?
That would be a commercial handbill.
That's pretty much what this paper, it's a shopper that has a few articles in it and other things. I mean, they would contest that with me, but that's who's supporting them is the advertisers, you know. So, I mean, I'm just making up my own definitions here, but the question is whether we want to pursue this. Where it gets really bad with this is the summertime. You know, that's when we're at our most.
Possible to work with the Observer to come up with a distribution list for those that maybe want to suspend it when they're gone, or people that choose to read it online that don't necessarily.
I just think, I think it's one of those things where, in terms of the problem that was communicated to us, again, the second and third paper in the driveway, not the first paper, the second and third, that they, over time, had gotten lax with whoever's doing their distribution, and they had to get those folks back down and remind them that, hey, it's supposed to put it there if there's a paper already there. So I think they're hearing the concern and addressing that part of the concern. If you're concerned about the initial paper in the yard, that part is, there's nothing they can do because they don't know the person's not going to pick it up until they see the person didn't pick it up. So I don't know that narrow issue is your concern, that's adequately being addressed. You know, we're not ordering them to get out of the car to go pick up last week's paper.
I appreciate their offer of saying that they're going to train people not to put out the second one, but I now go up and down my street and pick up 2 or 3. Well, now I have no incentive to do that because if I pick it up, they're going to throw another one next week. So that means I need to leave the newspapers there in order to keep them from putting out.
Well, that's why it seems to me, just a distribution list seems like a simple solution to at least mitigating some of the stuff that gets thrown out there. Like I said, I choose to read it online as opposed to picking it up and reading it. I know Jim said he likes to still read the paper, the actual paper, but maybe you'll get it delivered, but I would choose to not have it thrown in the driveway because I read it online.
If I to address the mayor's original question, I have no appetite for probing into this ordinance and further micromanaging newspapers or anyone for that matter. These are their First Amendment issues involved here. The newspaper's been contacted. They've, in good faith, responded that they're going to try to address the concerns as best they can. If there's some inconvenience for having a newspaper in front of your house that wasn't requested, I think it's a small price to pay for still having one functioning newspaper on the island. We're down to one newspaper. It's a tough market out there, and I would be reticent for First Amendment reason as well as just from an economic standpoint, just to allow these newspapers to survive. I think we should be looking for every way possible to encourage them and to facilitate their success. And I think this is a slippery slope, and I just respectfully would oppose reopening this ordinance.
I would concur, but maybe for different reasons, is that, right now, they're talking, making progress, and I don't think it's really necessary to go through and start changing the ordinance as long as making the right movements towards resolving it in an amiable way.
And I don't really have a big appetite for it myself, except that the concerns of this particular citizen, who I happen to know, have known for a very long time, he's a local who, ourselves, is very concerned about the local ecology here and what gets into our waters. And his main concern is not the newspaper appearance of it or in the driveways or whatever. His main concern is those plastic bags getting into the canals and into the bays, into the mangroves and everywhere else they get. That's his concern, is the plastic bags. So, if they had something that they could deliver it in that didn't have plastic on it, it's the same argument you make with Publix, giving out plastic bags. Where do these bags end up? They end up in landfills, or these particular ones that don't get picked up and get blown away, they end up in the mangroves or in the bay or in the canals or so forth. So that's really the concern. It's not, Jim, I appreciate the First Amendment issues and government staying out of business. I appreciate all that, but this really, this goes down to the lowest level here, which is plastic getting into the water.
And
That's really what this discussion is all about.
I agree, and I saw the constituents' original letter, and it was very thoughtful and so forth. But when I responded to the constituent, I encouraged him as a consumer to communicate his concerns to the paper and to talk to his fellow citizenry, to get folks to communicate with the paper a better business model or a different business model. And let the marketplace respond. If enough readers respond and agree with the constituent, then the newspaper will be responsive. And so instead of having the government intervene, I think it's just better to have the marketplace intervene. If there's a concern, if this gentleman wants to work with some of the environmental groups in the island and propose an alternative and to work something in a positive way, I think that's great. And I just hate to see folks come to government deal with this issue, particularly when you've got this delicate First Amendment dynamic involved. That's my concern, and I agree with what you're trying to say, and I'm not saying anybody's trying to thwart the First Amendment. I'm just saying it's a delicate issue that could be handled directly by the consumers themselves of the paper if they responded in a collective way that either proposes a solution or at least expresses concerns.
And I appreciate everything you said, and I agree with a lot of it. But what these constituents do after they look to us. They look to us for the leadership on these issues, and just by virtue of us discussing it today, is maybe that'll start the discussion out in the general public. And if there's a big appetite amongst the people, then and they want more done, why we'll hear about it.
I think too, there's a business aspect to it too, because the advertisers are paying to have eyes on their ads. And by counting circulation, they know no one is reading. They're not really communicating circulation numbers. So I think it makes sense for the advertisers to get their fair value for the money they're putting in for these advertisements. But again, I think we're in the conversation. I would encourage any newspaper to keep track of the places where the papers aren't getting picked up and update their circulation lists so that they're only delivering papers to people who want them, people who will read them.
And they will. I mean, I told them several years ago that I didn't want it delivered to the house because, I was getting enough papers at the time, and I could pick up the Observer anywhere, which I do. I read the Observer all the time, and I like having it. But I didn't need it delivered to my house to go along with the other 2 or 3 that I can pick up while I'm walking down the boulevard. So, and they did. They stopped. But of course, like attorneys, they got new delivery people. And here comes my paper again, So anyhow, but they can be notified.
Yeah, that's all good points. And I think, and maybe you or Rexanne could help me with this, it seems like I remember historically this newspaper rack issue was used by a prior council, but of which none of us were a member, potentially to because they were frustrated with the editorial perspective of a particular paper. And that's why I hate to open this Pandora's box. And I hate to go down that path again.
Look, I
I do that out of just warning, because I don't think it's a healthy exercise.
I think it-
understand,
the
I
gen-
appreciate, I can tell you, 100% certainty that, this particular regulation is content neutral. It's not intended to apply to any particular point of view. I can't speak to the reasons why, but as written, it is content neutral and complies with the First Amendment. You know, when I pulled this ordinance, and directed staff to put it on the agenda, I took the liberty of looking at other jurisdictions, to see what other jurisdictions in the area and across the state are doing. This particular ordinance is very similar, if not almost verbatim, than many of the other ones I looked at. And they're based upon the case law in existence on First Amendment rights. So it is First Amendment compliant. It's not based upon content-based regulation. And so I can represent to you and state to you that that's not the intent, that's not how it's written, and it's not how it gets applied.
That could very well be true, John, but just by way of record, just from history, it was a 3-2 vote on the council, so it obviously had some controversy at the time.
You know,
And I'm not trying to question anybody's motivations, but I'm just saying, these get to be delicate issues if we're not careful.
If I'm not mistaken, the genesis of the original news rack ordinance was brought forward to the council because of the news racks, not because of the papers or the content or anything else. It was because the machines themselves, the paper machines, were scattered willy-nilly all over the island. If anybody wanted a paper machine, they put down a paper machine. They were everywhere, and they weren't being attended to, and they were a mess, and it just looked like hell all over the island. That was the genesis of the ordinance. From there, I don't know, but it was to bring some orderliness to the situation that was historically out there, and to a large part, that's been accomplished.
Just know it was a 3-2 vote, and I remember reading about it in the past, and it was perceived by at least a newspaper that no longer exists as being punitive in nature. But whether that's true or whether that was the intent or not, I only just throw that up as a cautionary note.
I have no interest
Someone's
in
always going to cry foul.
reopening this ordinance, but I think it was a healthy exercise to bring it forward, as the mayor said, to get the 5 of us to talk about it, to at least open the door to work with them. And it sounds like they're working with staff, so I have no interest in reopening the discussion of changing.
Okay. Well, we've discussed it, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it. If there's a burning fervor amongst the townspeople, I'm sure we'll hear of it. Next item, why don't we take a 5-minute break and then go to the next item.
Decided not to. And a lot of eggs in one basket.
Who wanted, who said, up, let me know, and
Business I'm in,
Okay, we'll bring the meeting back to order. It's 1:50. Next item is a discussion regarding the town permitting additional waterway markers. Roger?
Chad will,
Chad?
you understand?
Morning, everybody. So as you know, the
Just identify yourself, sir.
yes, sir. Chad Schutz, environmental staff.
Thank you.
6 waterway markers have been installed. I believe last time I talked to Lee County, putting some finishing touches to meet the FWC guidelines. Staff had received a complaint regarding some idle signs, I guess blocking a boat dock or something down at Waterside Dock Association in Bay Beach. So we surveyed that and identified 4 signs. I believe was also included in your packet. Those idle signs, 2 of them looked like they're a bit older, 2 newer, all illegal. Bay Beach has, their Waterside Dock Association has expressed some interest in replacing them with slow signs, so I wanted to get some direction from council on to permit it, and if it's permitted, who's responsible for installation and maintenance.
Okay. Council?
has there been any discussion with them, their willingness to pay for it?
Not specifically, but they have expressed interest in replacing it. I kind of assume that they're not opposed to it. I just,
I mean, that's their pilings, at least 2 of them are.
I know in my discussions with them about the ones that they just installed, that they were willing to pay for those signs, so I don't think that.
I don't see them as being opposed to it, but I haven't had the discussion specifically.
All of these ones that are nailed up on pilings next to boat docks, those are the illegal ones? Are they,
So on the page with 4 signs, the last page of
Yes.
the survey report, the 2 on the top are those are kind of like in the middle of that dock, or docks.
Yes.
And the 2 pictures on the bottom are facing north and facing south, those dock structures outside.
oh, it's, the question is signs, everywhere are signs.
I don't believe FWC would allow them to permit it. It needs to come from a local sponsor.
You think it's a good idea, Chad?
Yes, ma'am. Needs to be
Chad thinks
consistent.
it's a good idea. He's the
Yeah,
expert.
You just said it wouldn't be permitted?
We wouldn't allow Bay Beach themselves
Yeah,
to
Bay Beach can't
permit it.
apply, so.
Can't do it on their own, okay.
Right, so, I think, we all aware that, you know, the potential issues of boats, you know, being at speed. So, and if they're willing to pay for and maintain the signs, we would just be the agency to permit them. For some reason, if they didn't maintain them, we would just take them down. In the future, if there's a sign that's in disrepair, we need to replace it. If they wouldn't do it, just then take it down. So
I'm good with that.
if you're all comfortable with that, that's how we'll proceed.
Yes.
Yes.
Enough. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Short and sweet. Item is Baymar Drive easement discussion regarding a neighborhood request for an observation pier at Baymar Drive, existing property ownership under the current easement agreement.
Right, so, Mayor, members of council, we have a sort of a neighborhood improvement process where the neighborhood can come to us and ask us for help to gain a neighborhood improvement. We were approached by a resident of Baymar Street, Drive. We explained to them what the process was. They went through the effort of walking their street to see if their neighbors were interested, and conveyed to us that in fact they were, to do something similar like we did on Hercules and Coconut. However, there is a twist with this, and the twist with this is that unlike those streets where the town were able to put the observation piers, we owned the street end. The right-of-way literally ran into the water. This particular street, we don't own the street end. There is an easement shared by the two adjacent owners. My understanding, one owner might be amenable to letting us use that as an access point, but the other owner is adamantly against it. So the reason this is on the agenda is for a couple of reasons. One is we want you to know that we were approached, we were trying to work with the neighborhood to achieve this, and it basically reached an impediment that would require us to sort of intercede within a matter, a private property matter, if I'm framing that correctly, John, between private property owners. And once we realized that was the case, we just kind of put a hard stop on this to bring it to you to see if you had any thoughts or suggestions or guidance on how or if you would like us to proceed.
I would hesitate to get involved in this. Roger indicates that one of the owners is not amenable. He's not only not amenable, my understanding, he's been in years-long litigation with the entire neighborhood. I've talked to several people who live on that street who tell me they actually have a litigation fund that the neighbors all contribute to because this person keeps blocking their access to the bay, and they have to constantly go to court to get reopened. Contempt has been found of this person. Then we'll, on the breach of going to jail, we'll then move the impediment. I think we would just be getting ourselves in for lots of legal fees if we got involved in this neighborhood.
Is the name of that person a name that we would all recognize?
Yes.
Okay. I tend to agree with the vice mayor that I'm not one to jump into the middle of a private property issue between two owners. Although I do sympathize with the neighborhood, at this point, that's really their fight. And I was going to suggest that they bring pressure upon this person, but it sounds like they've tried everything that they can possibly do. But
And the situation is different than the others where we have ownership of the property that would grant us access to build the pier. Here we do not.
Right, well, I mean, under cooperative people, it theoretically could have been achieved, but we just ran into a case where we didn't have that level of.
I would hesitate to set the precedent, further precedent for building more public piers outside the precedent. We already have a precedent that we're willing to do it where we own the land. Then we would be opening it up to more and more neighborhoods. I don't think it's a good precedent to set for that reason as well.
I think if this particular property owner had a change of heart somewhere along the line and they were to come to some sort of agreement where they granted the town an easement or some such legal instrument, that could be done. But not having that, I would hesitate to get involved in it. I'm sorry to say that because the majority of the people on the street want it. It's a shame that they don't cooperate.
I mean, the real poison pill is ownership. You don't own it, building on what someone else owns. I don't think there's much we can do. And I appreciate that, the Baymar neighborhood, but I just don't, without ownership, I don't think there's.
Okay, that's your answer. Okay, the next item, I presume that no one else had anything else to add, right? No? Dan? No. Okay, the last item is the American Rescue Plan. This is a preliminary discussion and planning of the American Rescue Plan funds. I would just caution the council that although we may all have our own wish lists involved with some potential funds that the town could receive, not having the parameters that have been set by the government as to how we can spend this may make this conversation a little premature.
Mr. Mayor.
I'll leave that to you all to decide.
Mr. Mayor, to your point,
sir.
there was an excellent article in the news press on Sunday about how this aid could be utilized by local communities like Fort Myers Beach. And they discussed, they interviewed various county commissioners, mayors, town managers. I think Roger had a quote in it. It's very clear that the direction and the rulemaking has not been completed by the feds at this point, and this conversation is premature. And I would just recommend that we put it on the agenda for the next M&P, and if it's not ripe at that time, we'll just postpone it again. But I do think at some point it'll be great to have this conversation, but I agree it's premature.
Tinker.
I agree.
It was easy. Very good. Next item is agenda management, as always. Anybody have anything they'd like to add to the list? Or anything else?
I'm not sure if it actually needs to go on the agenda or how we should handle it, but we seem to have a continuing issue with people receiving texts and emails during meetings, and then someone brings it up. And it's a bigger problem when we're doing a quasi-judicial matter because it's an ex parte communication. Maybe we need to draft something to put in our policy manual about it. But even when it's not a quasi-judicial hearing, I have an issue with people texting us in the middle of a meeting. If you want to give me your input, you need to get it to me before 9 a.m. on the day of the meeting. We should be paying attention to what's going on in the meeting, and I understand if you get a text from your spouse or something, yes, we should be responsive to that. But I don't think we should be taking emails from the general public about an issue. I mean, right when we're discussing it, we'll be getting texts and emails.
No, I tend to agree with you on that, and today was an exception for me. I mean, I never take texts, but today I did, if you're referring to
Was
me.
not referring to that, but I
but-
mean, we had it happen during the
We have,
quasi-judicial
we have
hearing on
had,
Monday.
we have, and I didn't care for that either, to be honest with you. I'm the same way. I feel if you don't get to us before the meeting or be here physically for the meeting, I don't think you should be, it shouldn't be interactive while we're discussing it, you know? It would be like us not allowing people to engage in public comment while they're up here at the podium during public comment. So I agree with you, and so I don't know whether the rest of the council does or not, but to discuss that we can. Or if you want to discuss it at a future M&P meeting.
I think it's worth discussing, because what happened on Monday was unacceptable, and I think procedurally, we ought to have procedures in place that help address that. Having said that, I do think there are times, given the challenges that our sound system faces, that I've been contacted numerous times when a mic is not working for one of us or one of the staff, or the camera's not on, or that something's askew, and I think that's been helpful in remedying those challenges. So maybe a little exception for sound and camera and procedural issues. I don't know how you prevent the public from providing input, but maybe there's a disclosure dynamic or something we ought to be thinking about, because technology is changing. A lot of us, like, for example, on Monday, we're in here for, I think, 7.5 hours on a zoning hearing. Some of us have jobs and various things we're dealing with outside of here, so you have to be able to communicate occasionally for work or home purposes during a 7.5 hour meeting. So you'd have to figure out a way to exempt that. Yeah, what happened Monday was not good, and that was a very unique dynamic right in the middle of a hearing. And it needed to be disclosed. I think we handled it appropriately, but I just think
What was that?
we got an email. Actually, John got an email earlier in the morning, forwarded it to Roger. Roger then shared it with us about all these
Calls for
potential
service.
sheriff complaints against the applicant, even though it really wasn't about the applicant. Most of them weren't. And then that was right in the middle, but they didn't have it, and so the council was then informed of a
Disruptive.
well, not just disruptive, but I think, quite frankly, ex parte and potentially procedurally inappropriate Because we were all then prejudiced with this information that wasn't verified, but the applicant didn't know about it, and they didn't have the ability to address it. I just think we need to think about, as the vice mayor says, a procedure, particularly when there's sensitive issues that involve an issue that's before us right at that moment. I mean, it's awkward. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's worth discussing and having our attorney take a look at it.
As there was a discussion, taking a quick look at the council's policies and procedures, and I think that the best way to address this issue consistent with the policies and procedures, which, by the way, doesn't specifically address this issue. It does talk about, what I would call lay-down items that sometimes come up at last minute, that after the agenda has been published, it does provide for the ability to distribute those items. So what I would suggest, and what I will do, and obviously you can direct the manager or instruct the manager to do the same, is that if something comes to us, the last available moment for us to provide it to you would be prior to the beginning of the meeting, essentially as equivalent of a lay-down item, if we believe it's pertinent. Beyond that, we won't. So there won't be any middle of the meeting emails or text or any other types of communications, certainly from myself and presumptively from staff as well. And that's the way we'll operate from this point forward.
It would seem that we need to put something in our policy manual, though, because you and Roger aren't going to be here forever, and these things get forgotten. So I guess I'd like to see it in the policy manual, and maybe with a couple of different levels. There's a level that you don't provide us anything after the meeting starts, unless it is X, Y, or Z. And then go on to state, this doesn't mean that a council person can't be communicating with family or take an email about a mic problem, as long as it doesn't have to do with the subject matter that's being voted on. I'd like to see it set out in the policy manual so that this doesn't happen
So
again.
we could work, John, right, to draft some language and show it to you, and then if you like it, we can insert it in the policy.
As far as sound and camera issues, as you said, there must be a better contact than a councilman to.
Really,
Provide a number.
the best
Yeah,
thing to do is notify the clerk.
this is
They're the ones who are going to be able to address it or not.
this is the current language. Occasionally, an item comes up late and may be placed on the amended agenda or as an add-on, in parentheses, added too late to be included in the published agenda. Such additions are kept to an absolute minimum so as not to burden the council or the public with items not receiving sufficient advance notice. Important, potentially controversial items are not made as add-on items except in extreme emergencies.
That's sort of a whole different thing, though. That's about things that weren't on the agenda. The problem I'm seeing, the really serious problem, is when it is on the agenda and we're getting input from people that could be considered ex parte
I would
during a
consider
hearing.
that to be an add-on to the published agenda, but we can clarify that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, there's your direction.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, just before you close the meeting, I want to be sure that I have two items to discuss with the council real quick. You're ready.
Right ahead.
Okay, so the first item, Council Idaho, I just want to let you know, we were responsive to your request. The silver bike rack is being reconditioned for the town use, and that's why that one wasn't the one proffered to the Art Association, just so you know.
Do we procedurally, Roger, need to give formal permission for you to then donate it, or will that come
Yeah,
up
that'll be
later?
on your next agenda.
Okay, very good, thank you.
And the second issue I want to bring to the council's attention is we've been having ongoing meetings with the folks at Leonardo Arms. Recall, they came before town council and communicated their concerns about the sand erosion affecting their area of the beach. We are working with the state agencies to attempt to get that stretch of beach qualified for state funding, which means then we could use TDC funding and, potentially address the issue. One of the solutions, not the only solution, but one of the solutions is that with
within the state regulations, there's a criteria that if there's enough registered rentals with the state, they view that as eligibility factor. So we did an analysis of all the properties there and how many are currently registered with the state and how many are would need to be registered. And one of the potential ways that we could address this is that in our registration form, we say that you just affirm that you're registered with the state. We don't verify that as part of the process. I know how the council wants us to be, we're gloves in dealing with code enforcement matters, but one of the impacts of that is that people who we believe are renting units in these properties may not have registered with the state. So before we begin to try to do some kid glove type of follow up with those people, I just wanted to let you know that that's the reason why we're doing it. See if we, by getting more of them registered with the state, we can get more qualified properties, therefore address erosion.
The condo association at Leonardo Arms help you with that? In other words, encourage their members?
They're helping us with their building, but it's more than their building because it's the contiguous properties as well.
Other condo units could help the town by encouraging their,
They can help themselves and
and
help the town.
themselves, yeah, yeah. Well, that's good to know, because I'll pass that along.
Isn't there like just a number? I thought it was like you needed 5 units in a building to have the beach
So,
qualified.
without calling some out, we have of the, I don't know, 18 or so properties, okay? We have about half who don't meet the criteria in terms of being registered with the state, but we suspect that there are some rentals going on within those properties.
Some of those folks have registered with the town and just not checked registered.
Some of them may not even be registered with town, but some of them may not be registered with town and/or, just don't forget, condos can opt out by registering the whole building. So they register the whole building and individual units are not, may not be registered with the state.
Does TDIC, if they just take the town's word for it? In other words, if they check the box, they take our word for it that they therefore register with the state, or do they check?
We
directly?
take their word for it. The original draft of that ordinance was that you had to submit the actual copy of your registration, and that got taken out by the council at the time.
Okay. We take their word for it, and then TDIC takes our word for it, that they've done it
No,
with the
they
state.
actually check it.
Oh, they do check, okay, that helps.
They're the ones getting the money, not us.
Right. So we're going to try to see what we can do in a kid glove fashion, to see if we can get more people to do that for their benefit as well as the town. You may hear some feedback about that, so you're aware. Then we're continuing to try to work with the state to see if we can qualify as many of the properties along the beach as possible, so that, because we can't just go and do it in front of property A, not property B, C, and D. So we're going to continue to work that angle as well, and we'll update you on how successful or unsuccessful we are. But just didn't want you to be getting a call, hey, they're asking us about this, why are they asking us about this?
That's really helpful.
So our intentions are not of a nefarious nature. We're trying to solve a problem. We're trying to help people, and this is the way
We're trying to help get the beach in front of their property renourished,
Sort of
and we need their help to do that.
help us help you.
Some of the money that they're paying by this bed tax goes towards that beach. So there's a direct relationship.
Exactly.
That's right, okay. That's
true.
Very good to know.
I think the bed tax is separate from the state funding. This is the state funding, right?
Yeah, there's state funding for beach renourishment, and then there's a local match that we usually go to the TDC for, and then there's a little piece that we pay for.
Right, but the part I don't think is attached to the TDC money, I think it's attached to the state money.
That's correct. It's
Just
I
so you
mean,
know, it's not the
it's-
TDC part.
Well, you're remitting How that works for the state, I don't know exactly, whether it's a general revenue or if it's earmarked or not, but money you pay as part of your rental, if you do it as in accordance with state law, goes to the state, and then the state uses some of the state's money to renourish beaches, and I don't know exactly how that filters through their financial system, but there's an indirect correlation. It may not be a direct correlation, as the vice mayor suggested.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. Is there anything else for the good of the order before we adjourn?
I've got one question. It's not really, maybe not here, but it's Vice Mayor Hasselfras. You mentioned once about a potentially vacated or not maintained right-of-way. Town was going to look into try to.
Actually, Chelsea is looking into several of them, and I provided her more information about where those were. There are several, they're not completely unmaintained. I don't want to give the idea that they're an eyesore. It's just that they're not marked anymore. I ask people as they're walking on the paths, did they know this path is part, to your community, or whether people don't even know that it's part of their community. What Chelsea was looking into where those are actually located, and I believe that's still in process.
Yes, it is. What's happened is, we've done the assessment of the conditions, and now we have, in fact, a meeting, I think, later this week, to go over with, trying to identify the owners/responsible parties for those, to see if, they're aware of their maintenance responsibility, and whether they have a mechanism to affect the maintenance, or if they're perhaps willing to turn it over to the town, if that makes sense in that particular location. It's a complicated process, because one of the reasons why they're not being maintained is original sort of homeowner structure to care of that has disintegrated somewhat over time.
For example, Sandpiper Village no longer has a functioning homeowners association. And occasionally somebody who lives there was making their own sign and going over and putting it up, which was nice for them to do. But it wasn't happening in any organized fashion, and I think there might be some interest in them turning them over to the town.
And just to further add, and just, take one step backwards, folks from Leonardo Arms were also asking us, well, why don't we create more new beach accesses, so that under the beach access aspect of beach renourishment, that area can be renourished. Obviously, that would require property acquisition and a lot of things for the town to do, for us to do that, versus them and adjacent property giving us an access or an easement or something, which didn't seem like that was going to be done easily. But
They were interested in the town acquiring land for beach right-of-ways, for beach access, but they weren't willing to offer up part of their land.
well, I sense a reluctance on their part. But the point is, but perhaps through the mechanism that the mayor or the vice mayor kicked off, we may get fortunate and help ourselves with some of this by that. So we'll see what happens. But it's going to be a protracted process, I guess, is my real point, because unraveling these associations and finding someone to talk to who has knowledge, and I didn't even know we owned that. I didn't even know that I have to maintain that. It's not just talking to one person. Sometimes talking to a whole block, group of owners.
You may have to reform an organization in order to take any kind of action.
Or perhaps maybe if it's in a desirable location, if they say, well, look, would you be interested in it? I could bring that back to you all, and you could decide whether or not that would be appropriate or not. So, I mean, it's going to be a long project, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
But it is actually a goal in our comprehensive plan to acquire more beach accesses on the south end. South of Flamingo, we have nothing.
And I completely support it. I was just wondering where it is, because we haven't talked about it for some months.
It's going to be complicated, and I think John is going to have to get his hand in it too, because it's going to become a property issue, and how do we get authority from these owners that don't have a homeowners association anymore?
Coordinating efforts.
Thank you.
It's a very interesting discussion, and look forward to hearing more about it in the future. Okay, is there anything else before we adjourn? We'll adjourn. It's 11:18. Got a motion. Objection, no objection.